Every single day and in every city across the world, people are getting rich from real estate investing. They aren't anybody special. They just learned how to do it. That's all. My role as a real estate investor is to find great deals, invest in them, improve the value, and refinance those deals to get my initial investment back. Everybody deserves the right to be rich. And in my real estate masterclass, I'm going to give you all the strategies and tactics that I developed. The same strategies that I used to get from a young man with no real estate experience to someone that has successfully purchased over $1 billion in real estate assets. You're going to learn everything from the myths of real estate investing, things that hold most people back, to how to find a great real estate deal and fund them with other people's money. How to successfully close deals with a team of people that are paid from the deal itself. And once you understand that people with money want to invest, they need to invest their money, because if it's not invested, then we all are going backwards financially. The rate of inflation will always be higher than the savings rate in a bank. Sometimes people tell me that real estate investing is risky. For some, it is definitely risky. But the risk is typically tied to that person's level of real estate education, just like anything else. Increase your education and lower your risk. It's really that simple. I'm Ken McElroy, and this is my master course. Every single day and in every city across the world, people are getting rich from real estate investing. These real estate investors, they are just normal people, like me and like you. They aren't anybody special. They just learn how to do it. That's all. Most everything in life revolves around money. If we want to travel, we need money. If we want to eat, we need money. If we want to buy something for ourselves or for someone else, we need money. Then why is it that most people don't really understand money and how to invest it? And why is it that some people have money and others simply do not? Why is it that most people turn their life savings over to someone else just to manage it? There is a big difference between the rich and the poor, and the difference is just education. Your life could be in a completely different place just by improving how you can learn to invest safely into real estate. My role as a real estate investor is to find great deals, invest in them, improve the value, and then refinance those deals to get my initial investment back. Tax-free. Everybody really deserves the right to make money tax-free. Everybody deserves the right to be rich. In my real estate masterclass, I'm going to give you all the strategies and tactics that I've developed. The same strategies that I used to go from a young man with no real estate experience and no real estate education to someone that has successfully purchased over $1 billion in real estate assets. You're going to learn everything from the myths of real estate investing, things that hold most people back, how to find great real estate deals and fund them with other people's money, how to successfully close deals with a team of people that are paid from the deal itself, and how to manage that deal once you've acquired it. You know, real estate investing is mostly following a formula or a system, just like anything else in life. It's just a simple repetition over and over once you start to understand how money works. Once you understand that money is plentiful, you will see things very differently. Once you understand that people with money want to invest, they need to invest their money, because if it's not invested, then we are all going backwards financially. Everyone is going backwards because the rate of inflation will always be higher than the savings rate in a bank. Sometimes people tell me that real estate investing is risky, and I always tell them, for some, it is definitely risky. but the risk is typically tied to that person's level of real estate education. Increase your education and lower your risk. It's really that simple. Because unless you learn how to invest your hard-earned money wisely, and until you learn how to ask the right questions, then you will just continue to be a pawn on the chessboard of life. And no matter how your life is now, you can always do better. I'm Ken McElroy, and this is my master course. In every business and in every industry, there are people who seem to just drip with success. They seem to know all the right people, make all the right decisions, be in all the right places at exactly the right time. They seem destined for success, whether they even try or not. Real estate investing is no different. In every city or town, there seems to be rich real estate tycoons that struck it rich through real estate. These are the people who just make success look easy. They appear confident, knowledgeable, savvy, and seem to see the opportunities where others don't. It's easy for onlookers to think the achievements of these golden few are the result of luck or some sort of magic. But magic and luck have absolutely nothing to do with it. Over 20 years ago, I decided I was going to be one of those people, just as I described. I was going to make my own success, be my own boss, and achieve financial freedom. So I chose real estate investing and property management as my route. Call it instinct, call it impatience, call it burning desire. I wasn't about to wait for a lucky break or a magic charm. I set out to make my own dream happen, and I did it through action. In the early days of my first property management and real estate deals, there was a lot of trial and error, and I made my share of mistakes. But for every one of my mistakes, I learned 10 lessons, and I got smarter every single day. I started to see patterns, discover formulas and systems, and develop a network of people I could count on. It took time and it took work, but the more I pursued my dream, the luckier I felt, and the more often magical opportunities presented themselves to me. Maybe there's a bit of luck and magic and success, but it's luck and magic that comes from working hard and being prepared. At the Rich Dad events where I often speak, I see people all the time who are taking their first steps toward future success, much like I did 2 decades ago. Many have what it takes, the drive and the desire that will help them overcome obstacles and be prepared. Unfortunately, I also see at these events some who lack what it takes. They are the ones looking to get rich quick, have little or no idea of the commitment required to achieve business success. Others have a lot of desire, but lack the technical skill and the knowledge that can only come from experience. I'm doing this series for them. This is not a get-rich-quick series. It is not a series written to motivate. Although I hope you'll be inspired to follow your real estate investment dreams. Instead, it is a series that will disclose proven methods, remove the unknowns, and shorten the learning curve for anyone who chooses investment real estate as his or her path to financial freedom. Before we get too deep into the how-tos of finding, buying, and managing investment property, let's take some time to drive out a few of the myths. Myths that if you buy into them, will only hold you back. Have you or others said these very things? Are any of these statements echoing in your head and preventing you from moving forward? Are these untruths paralyzing you with fear? Let's get rid of them right up front. It's time to dump the baggage. You have to have money to start. People think they need to have a large sum of money to invest in real estate. They think it's like saving for their first home, or it's something they can only do once they have made their fortune somewhere else. Both of these thoughts could not be further from the truth. You don't need hundreds of thousands of dollars in the bank to invest in real estate, and you certainly don't need millions. All you need is a good real estate deal that makes sense, one that has profit and potential and is based on solid financials. My partner Ross McAllister and I have been working this way for years. My very first investment deal was a condo that I bought furnished and rented out. It was a 2-bedroom unit that I put into a rental program. People who wanted to get away from it all could call up and rent my condo or one of hundreds of others for that weekend getaway. A cool $116,000 is what I paid, and I put down $20,000 out of my own pocket. So you're probably thinking, see, I knew you had to have some cash to get started in this business. Well, I did that deal before I knew better. Contrast that with a more recent acquisition of a 182-unit apartment community in Sun City, Arizona. The total cost was $9 million. Before you close your mind and say, this is out of my league, let me finish the story. The down payment was $2 million, which we raised from other investors. My out-of-pocket was $0. I gave the majority of the ownership to the people who lent me the money for the down payment. In essence, I formed a partnership with them. My salesmanship had nothing to do with it. The deal was the hero. It was so good that people wanted to be part of it. And what I've come to know is that there are a lot of good people looking for good real estate deals. Some people are partner averse, but I think partners are valuable. They help you spread your risk by allowing you to own smaller positions in a number of properties rather than a big position in just one. And it's a fact that teams accomplish more. As for the return, which deal would you rather do? A $116,000 property that cost you $20,000? Or the one that cost you nothing and yielded you 10% of $9 million? For the record, that's $900,000. And I'd choose the latter any day of the week. Once you have located a real estate opportunity, the task is finding investors who are looking to earn a good return on their money. The first deal you do, granted, is the most difficult because you are an unproven entity. But trust me, it gets easier and easier with every successful deal you put together. Today, my partner and I have people literally standing in line who want to invest in our next real estate venture. Not because we're anything special, but because we have built an amazing team of people and are very thorough. We look at a lot of deals and choose only the ones that are financially viable, like the one I just described. We also communicate with our investors and treat them fairly. When they make money, we make money. You may be surprised to learn that there are plenty of people interested in investing in real estate, particularly when other investment vehicles like the stock market and bonds are flat or declining. Just look around at any real estate event. There are thousands of people in every city in which I speak which are looking for real estate investment deals that make sense. You have to know somebody to get started. While knowing a few key people, such as a real estate agent, an attorney, or a banker, may save you some time, you don't need to know anyone even remotely connected with investment real estate to get started. In this series, you'll discover the key people you'll need to have on your team. And you'll find that the goals you set for yourself will actually define the team. People you know today may or may not be the ideal people for your team once you determine what you want to gain from your real estate investment business. Just get started, and you'll be surprised at how many people you'll get to know and how much they'll teach you. You'll have friends in the business before you even know it. Here's what I mean. Not long ago, we did a deal in Portland, Oregon, and I live and work in Arizona. I hadn't been to Portland in over 10 years. Anyone I had once known there was long gone. Neither I nor anyone else in my company knew a soul in Portland. What we did know was that the city was situated on two rivers and that the unemployment was high. The latter meant that people who owned property were probably not doing very well. And to me, that spelled a buying opportunity. We had one big problem, however. We knew about the city, but we didn't know a single person in it. We figured that the market conditions were at least worth a plane trip and a few days in Portland. Before our trip, we made our minds up to find our team, at least the start of it. So we went on the internet and we looked up property managers, city officials, brokers, and so on in our preparation for the trip. We were not about to travel that far and not meet with anybody who could educate us on the market. As a result, we had 10 or 12 meetings over a period of 2 days. It cost us a few lunches and some dinners, but we had the beginnings of our team. You want to, but you don't really have the time. This really comes down to choices and priorities. There is always time to do the things we need to do, like go to work every day, mow the lawn, feed the dog, and often there isn't time to do the things we really want to do, like learn a second language, or build a bookcase, or volunteer in the community. There is a big difference between need and want. We'll often do what we need and often put off what we want. Unfortunately, our wants are what truly enrich our lives. The investment real estate business is something you should want to do and may even need to do. It's work. To be truly successful, especially in the beginning, you will be involved in the day-to-day activities of finding and evaluating property, negotiating deals, overseeing contract repair work, possibly even managing the property once it's yours. I can honestly say I find the business rewarding. It's fun, and because of that, it's profitable. I fell victim to the myth of not having enough time myself, and I take full blame. Finally, I embraced the idea, and I actually started wanting to get it done. But wanting was not enough. What got me going was a do-it-or-else deadline. That got my attention and made me realize that I needed to get disciplined. Sometimes you're just not feeling motivated, and that's okay. That's when discipline kicks in. That's what got me going. If you don't have time to begin your real estate business, maybe in your mind, you don't really need to do it. Maybe you simply want to do it. And want alone may not be enough to get you started. After all, if you work during the week and at another job, you will have to search for and evaluate properties on the weekends, and possibly even in the evenings. You need to make phone calls when you can during the week or at night. There's always a way to make your dreams come true, as long as they are truly your dreams. You need to be a seasoned negotiator or a business person. This is just not true. Experience in the business may make that first walk into an investor's office more comfortable, but that's all it will do. Your true power and your confidence won't come from your past experience. Instead, it will come from the solid deal that you assemble that is a win-win for everyone involved. This series will show you how to find and evaluate property with the ultimate goal of establishing a realistic purchase price that maximizes your monthly income and appreciates the asset. Find a deal like that, and everyone will want a piece of that deal. Over the years, I've walked away from a lot of deals, and negotiation had nothing to do with it. One of those deals was a 205-unit building in Glendale, Arizona. The listing price was $7.9 million, and the broker told me there were other offers, the highest one being $7.2 million. We did our homework on the property, and by my estimation, $7.2 million was fair based on the operations of the property. The seller declined every offer and pulled the listing. 6 months later, the seller relisted the building for $8.1 million. If I had still been interested in the property, I would have made an offer based on the operations. It would have been the same $7.2 million offer I made before. The seller would probably kick me out along with everyone else who made him an offer based on the operations. Are you surprised to learn that that seller still owns that building today? With the methods in this series, you'll find out that the listing price is meaningless. There is no point negotiating based on this number, and actually doing so is a recipe for disaster. That is because in most cases, the listing price is the seller's opinion of what the property is worth. It's not founded on actual operations of the property. What most people consider negotiation meetings are, for me, more accurately described as presentation meetings. That's when I present the numbers, and they are pretty much take it or leave it deals. When I get kicked out, and in truth, usually it's a mutual parting of the ways, it's because the numbers don't work. Walking away is a good thing. You have to know a lot about real estate. This myth holds people back every single day. They feel they have to already be experts in a field in order to be successful, whether it is real estate or stock investing or landscaping. First of all, success is a journey. It's not a destination. And all successful people start in the same place. One day they wake up, they throw their legs over the side of the bed, they yawn, and they begin. Only by beginning and by continuing day after day do we ever become experts. We gain expertise through experience. By watching this series, you'll get a solid framework from which to begin. And you'll gain enough knowledge to sound pretty smart at a cocktail party and a backyard barbecue. But more importantly, you'll learn tons more from your first deal, and more still from your second and third, and even more from your fourth. The only way you'll know a lot about real estate is to begin in real estate. Once you do that, you'll meet people, learn your markets, see your patterns, and understand the trends. Before you'll know it, you'll be wowing people at cocktail parties and barbecues with experiences you've lived rather than you've just read about. To achieve your wants, goals cannot be optional. You either decide what you want in life, or life decides for you. Everyone has ideas and dreams. Everyone. A goal is simply an idea or a dream that is written down. That's all it is. In this video, I will show you a few simple strategies on how to write, set, and achieve your goals. What is a goal? It's easy to get hung up on the terminology. Is that a goal? Is it a vision? Maybe it's an objective. Maybe it's a mission. Forget about all that right now, and don't worry about textbook definitions. My goal with this series is for it to become your personal guide that simplifies the process of real estate investing by showing you how to find, buy, and manage property right. And I may as well start with goal setting. A goal has three things. Number one, it's something you plan to achieve. Maybe your goal is to buy one investment property in a 12-month period. Or maybe you want to earn $5,000 a month in income within 2 years. You might even set your goal so high that you decide you want to be the #1 rental property owner in your town within 5 years. Whatever goal you set, make sure it is something you plan to achieve. Nothing is more valueless than a goal that sits on a shelf and never receives any action. Those are simply dreams. There's no real power in dreams unless they're acted upon. Number two, it should be measurable. Your goal should be measurable always. The goal of wanting to be my own boss wasn't really a good goal. As I said, it took me years to learn how to set goals and take advantage of the power they harness. A much better goal for me would have included a time limit, say 1 year, to become my own boss, or an earnings level like earning $100,000 a year. This is more specific. Goals that are vague are hard to attain, and they're even harder to stick to. If there is no time limit, dollar amount, or rank comparison, for example, how will you know when you've arrived? It's virtually impossible. One real estate investor I know has a very measurable goal to acquire 1 2-unit property per year. Another has a goal of acquiring 10 homes a year. The point here is that your goals are achievable and measurable. Number 3, it should be attainable. Goals must be realistic and attainable. Otherwise, you will become overwhelmed and they will either be shelved or never acted upon, or modified midstream to something more realistic. The latter alternative is acceptable, but goals that are set too high can trigger feelings of failure if they're not attained. On the other hand, they can be exhilarating if they are actually achieved. My first goal of becoming my own boss when I was an employee was very achievable looking back on it. But at the time, it seemed like an ambitious dream. After all, I had a steady job that paid for my car, my house, my lifestyle. And deciding to give all that up was frightening, but I knew it was something I had to do. The goal, while lofty, was not impossible, and that gave me hope, motivation, and desire to achieve it. So how do you set your goals? So I use a 5-part system called SMART. And for things to be smart, they need to be specific, measurable, agreed upon in writing, realistic, and time activated. So let's say somebody wants to buy one rental property for $200,000 in 1 year. That's very specific, and it's time activated. And it's very measurable. You have 1 year to do that. Now, is it agreed upon in writing? Not yet. You actually have to share that with somebody so they can hold you accountable. And whether it's realistic or not, that's up to you. You're going to learn a lot more about how you don't need the money to buy that property. So if you think you need to buy it yourself, your own belief system might be getting in the way of what's realistic for you. Another great program I found, it's called Strategic Coach. And it's founded and run by an entrepreneur by the name of Dan Sullivan. This program is centered on the 7 laws for experiencing continued personal growth and helping you develop a life plan. The Strategic Coach 7 laws of lifetime growth are: always make your future better than your past. Always make your contribution bigger than your reward. Always make your learning greater than your experience. Always make your performance greater than your applause. Always make your gratitude greater than your success. Always make your enjoyment greater than your effort. And lastly, always make your confidence greater than your comfort. Goals evolve over time. After many years of working for myself as one of the 2 principal owners of Arizona-based MC companies, the real estate investment firm my partner and I still own today, I began to discover that my goals had evolved. I wanted to be more than just my own boss. I realized that I wanted financial freedom. Freedom financially to do the things in life that I wanted to do, like spend time with my children, coach Little League, and travel with my family. I knew this goal could only be attained through the accumulation of wealth that would appreciate over time. There's nothing wrong with a goal that evolves over time, unless you are changing your goal every time you hit a roadblock. That's called avoidance. Over time, as you are working to achieve your goal, your experiences will make you smarter. You may even see things a whole new way. Your goal may shift as a result of new awareness. My first goal was to become my own boss. That evolved into a goal of financial freedom. And now my goal is to help others who want to do the same. Make yourself accountable to somebody. When I set a goal for myself to get back in shape, I knew I'd have a better chance of succeeding if I had a partner. You know, someone who I knew on those mornings when I just didn't feel like running, they would be waiting for me up on the road at 5:30 a.m. This is accountability. At MC Companies, I have my partner, Ross McAllister. Ross and I help each other stay on course with our 5-year strategic plan. We also share the plan with the entire company of over 200 employees. By including everyone in the vision, everyone knows how they fit in. They're also accountable to one another, and we're all working in the same direction. The person or persons you are accountable to could be a business associate, a friend, your husband or your wife, even investors or employees. The important thing is to find a person who is encouraging and supportive of your venture. That's not to say you're looking for a person who never challenges your decisions. On the contrary, you're looking for a person who is based in reality and supportive of your dream. Be vocal with some and communicate your goals clearly. If you have goal fear, that is fear of telling anyone your goal in case you don't achieve it. Get beyond it. When you have your goal set on paper and burned in your psyche, tell everyone. Tell your real estate agent. Tell your attorney. Tell your friends, your family members, business associates. These are the people who will help you attain it. And in case I haven't made it clear yet, goals are never achieved alone. Here's a hypothetical example of a goal. You will acquire one 8-unit property in your metro area within the next 12 months that will generate at least $4,000 of average annual income over the next 5 years. That's a goal. It's measurable and it's clearly defined. It's certainly attainable. All that is really left is to make it happen. Contrast that goal with this very uninspired, non-motivating goal statement. I want to invest in some real estate and I am looking for a good rental property deal that will supplement my income. This goal is extremely vague, but unfortunately, that's how most people set and communicate goals, if you can call that statement a goal. It really sounds more like a pipe dream. If you share a goal as written in the first example with a few real estate agents, a few mortgage brokers, and some property managers, I know you will get calls. They will bring you opportunities because they can tell you are serious, that you know what you want, and that you have set a time limit. If you go to the same group with a goal as written in the second example, they will probably not respond at all because they don't know how. There is nothing there for them to sink their teeth into. Few, if any, opportunities will come to you. Instead, you'll be forced to find the opportunities yourself. And given the vagueness of the goal, you have a lot of work ahead of you. You'll know whether or not your goals are concrete by listening to what you say. Should you find yourself saying phrases like, "If you hear anything, let me know," or "Tell me if you see anything that looks good," then you need to define your goal further. Those phrases are telltale signs of vagueness. Once the goal is set, you need to have resilience and perseverance. If you've ever been part of anything entrepreneurial, or even if you've ever built something from scratch, then you know endeavors such as these take twice as long as you think, require twice as much work, and cost a lot more than you expected. These are facts of life, so I am never surprised when they prove to be true. In Portland, the acquisition of our waterfront property was destined to be a great investment. It's right on the Willamette River. And as I mentioned earlier, part of the building is built on the pier. There are waterfront views, and the entire project is over 300 units. There's nothing else like it in the whole city. Sounds like a dream come true. Well, many would have viewed this dream more like a nightmare from the start. The problem stemmed from years of deferred maintenance to battling numerous structural inadequacies. You name it, and we encountered it. We could have let these obstacles and dozens of others stop us 100 times from closing on this deal. But we knew in our hearts this property was worth the effort. It was worth driving through every one of those obstacles. We found solutions and invested the money necessary to bring this amazing project to its fullest potential. Try to keep your focus. There's a funny thing about goals and success. The closer you get to achieving your goal and the more successful you become, the more opportunities will come your way. You'll be tempted on almost a weekly basis with new properties and other business opportunities that promise to increase your revenue. The sure things will come out of the woodwork. All these opportunities are great, but you can't let them steer you away from your goal. Here's what happened to me. After we had built our property management business to a significant size and had begun looking for ways to increase revenue, I decided to start a carpet cleaning company. It made sense to me at the time. After all, we had thousands of apartment units with carpets to clean. Why should that business go to some other company? That single lesson cost me $250,000. But even more than the money, it took the eye off my goal for at least a year or two. It slowed the pace of my company growth. Our company would have achieved its goal a lot quicker if it hadn't been for this diversion. I guess I should say I learned a lot more than one lesson on that deal. As opportunities present themselves, ask yourself a question. How many balls do I want to juggle? If I take on this project, can I manage 10 more balls in the air? And more importantly, will taking on this project get me closer to achieving my goal? If your goal is to buy an 8-unit property and earn an average of $4,000 per year in the next 5 years, will a hot deal on a single-family home get you closer to achieving that? No, it won't. And in fact, it will divert your attention from the original goal and certainly not net you $4,000 a year in income over the next 5 years. If you are set on your goal, and you should be, sometimes it means passing up great deals that don't support it. Focus equals discipline. Goal setting is not an option. It is a requirement of success. The sooner you begin establishing your goal, the sooner you'll be ready to take the next step, establishing routine. At Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad events, where I sometimes speak, attendees always ask me, how do I find a good investment property? This has to be the most commonly asked question, and for good reason. There is a needle in the haystack sort of quality to this whole endeavor, or at least it seems that way, particularly if you've never done it before. Do you look in the newspaper, grab sales sheets from a real estate office, check the internet, drive around? The whole thing just seems so haphazard. Truth be told, there is a lot of information out there about property and a lot of ways to get that information. Maybe too many ways. Knowing which resources are valuable and knowing how to access them can save you time and a lot of frustration. In this series, I'll reveal a research strategy that you simply cannot do without. By walking you through my experience of buying a property in a new market I knew nothing about, you'll see how this research method works and what you can gain from it. There's no real trick to this at all. It's just having fun. Being open to the information that's available about your market, knowing where to look, and committing yourself to it. Researching a market can be a lot like doing the preliminary research for a college paper. Maybe you remember the feeling of stepping into the library first time or jumping on the internet, looking around at all the books and the magazines and the article, the computer databases, the microfilm, if you're as old as me. It's overwhelming. You knew the information you were looking for was in there somewhere. The problem was finding it and then making sense out of it. Your first paper was always the hardest. But once you got familiar with the best sources, the next paper just gets easier and easier. Well, at least that's what I was told. My college professors would be proud of me today because I did eventually learn how to research. And I learned how to make it really fun. We have a great time researching markets and properties because research to me is nothing more than using the resources around you to gain information and insight into a particular subject. In this business, that means talking to people, touring an area, taking in the sights, even within your own town. Kind of sounds like a purposeful, tax-deductible vacation, doesn't it? Well, it can be. So let's get this party started. The 3 levels of market research. The research techniques described in this series will help you in 3 ways. First, they will give you a snapshot of the various markets and the submarkets within your city or town. The more diligent you are about doing the research, the more vivid the picture will be. And in the series ahead, you'll see why a very vivid picture here will save you time and money later. Second, this research will show you how the market will influence your property investment. And third, you actually may be lucky enough to find property leads during the research phase, but don't count on it. The most important fruit from your efforts is the picture of the market. The properties will come later. Level 1 research. Level 1 research is what I call very preliminary stuff. To do it, you don't even have to leave your house. This is research you do before you even set foot on a property. Or in the case of the true story of our acquisition of the waterfront property in Portland, Oregon, before we even set foot in the town. You should know we didn't just pick Portland out of a hat. Before we settled on Portland, our goal was to do level 1 research on all the major markets in the Western United States. It was a time to expand our company's reach. And the question was where to go. One of the first things we did was look at all the newspapers and Business Journal newspapers in every major Western city on the internet. We followed the online hyperlinks to every interesting lead. For example, we type in a city like Denver into the search engine, and up would pop a story about population growth. We'd follow it. And then as part of that story, there'd be a link about school funding, and we'd follow that. What we found was very interesting, particularly in Portland. First, we discovered that the city has an urban growth boundary that we felt would limit the supply of rental property in the future. That's a good thing. Next, we found that the city of Portland was progressive in their downtown planning and progressive in terms of transportation with their light rail, bus system, taxi system, streetcar system, and even plans for a future water taxi on the Willamette River. We also found that living and working downtown was in high demand and that downtown employment picture was favorable. We were beginning to get our picture of the market. It was looking good. On the downside, we found statewide unemployment was leading the country with a whopping 8.1%. This was an important finding because when we saw that statewide number compared to the unemployment in downtown Portland, we knew for us the only opportunity was downtown or possibly a few other suburban bright spots. Furthermore, downtown was mostly all built out and had even greater supply restrictions than the rest of the metro areas. Our job was not going to be easy. We found all this information out in less than a day from my desk in Phoenix, Arizona. Although there were some negatives about the market, overall we were pleasantly surprised and impressed with Portland. We thought it would be a place with major corporate layoffs, a place plagued by downturns in the logging industry and in agriculture, and one that was especially hit hard by other economic woes, including declines in the stock market and other after effects of the recession, which had just happened months earlier. Our preconception of the area was based on the broad brushstrokes painted by the media, and oh boy, were we wrong. We saw Portland as a progressive city that was concerned about the quality of life, that had long-term plans for building a wonderful community for today and for tomorrow. We also found that downtown Portland was one of the least affordable places to live in the Northwest. Portland was a mixed bag, but the negatives didn't scare us. In real estate, you've heard the saying, buy low and sell high. In most cases, the opportunities to buy low are when the economy is down and the press is making a living by saying bad things about it. The point here is not to sell you on Portland, but to tell you that we would never have known any of this unless we decided to do level 1 research in that area. We would have never found out that downtown Portland was a market with good employment, that it was progressive and it forward-thinking, and they had very high cost of home ownership. This was all good news for rental property investment, contrary to the picture the media painted. We knew it was worthy of a site visit. Level 2 research. In Portland, we were a couple desert dwellers from Arizona who came armed with information but hadn't seen rain in months, let alone trees that actually bear leaves. We were as green as the Portland landscape. We plunked right into this market knowing no one. We were prepared, however, to conduct level 2 research once we got there to develop a team that would help us understand the market and maybe even lead us to a property. Research plays an important role in establishing yourself within the market and finding the people who will help you make things happen. Level 2 research is about meeting face to face, and we didn't waste any time. Even before we arrived, we had made phone calls to set up meetings with property managers and commercial brokers, commercial lenders, city officials, and business people like the publisher of the local apartment guide. When we arrived, we met with each and every one of them. First of all, they were amazed at how much we knew about the area and the depth of our knowledge. We affirmed the things we presumed to be true and set us straight on the assumptions that we were off base. For instance, they confirmed our assumption that the limited supply of housing in downtown Portland was greater than in any other area of the city. They confirmed that there was a high demand to live and work in the city. They confirmed that the downtown area was not only a vibrant, progressive community for those that lived there, but that it was also a draw for people who lived elsewhere through its Saturday markets, jazz festivals, holiday events, convention center, rose garden, parades, and more. It was truly a city center. We didn't get everything right during our level 1 research, though. The people we met with surprised us by painting a gloomier picture of the outlying suburban areas than we had painted ourselves. There was more overbuilding than we had assumed, and there was more available land than we assumed. Both Nike and Intel had a very large presence there, but other than them, there was not much any other large employment of any size. The overall picture was clearly a risky one. It was during this time that we really started narrowing down on our submarket. In any economic downturn, it's always smart to be in the market that will turn positive first. That's true of anything in business, whether it's the stock market, a business sector, or real estate. So we looked at several submarkets and determined that downtown Portland was strongest at this point and would be the first to rebound based on the simple economics of supply and demand, its diversified employment base, and lack of affordable housing. We learned that as the economy rebounded, the downtown market would be the area that rebounded first. While we were meeting with all our contacts, we clearly communicated our goal to buy a 200-plus unit apartment community and asked them a variety of questions like, who was their favorite property management people? What lawyer they recommended for legal work? If they knew any good accountants? We asked for recommendations for every team member we listed in the last video. By the time we left 2 days later, we had a vivid picture of our market. And we had narrowed our search to a viable submarket. We had some good leads for our team, and we were told of several properties that were possibilities. We also took in the sights, ate wonderful dinners, and generally enjoyed our time in Portland. Level 3 research. When we returned to Arizona, we not only vividly remembered what green trees looked like, but we knew Portland was an investment opportunity. But we still needed a bit more information to feel good about making a move there. That's where Level 3 research came into play. We first called every team referral and asked them the same questions we asked our initial contacts in Portland. Not only did they give their opinion and their insights, they pointed us in the direction of numerous websites, analyst newsletters, economic development offices, city government contacts, and other Portland business people who could add the finishing touches to our picture of Portland and could keep us on top of the happenings in the area for as long as necessary. We signed up for free online newsletters, got on mailing lists and email lists of real estate agents and commercial brokers, loan officers, and other professionals helpful to us. We are forever in the know and hooked into the network. During this whole process, we felt like a detective following up on leads and putting the evidence together to arrive to a conclusion. By involving others, we were able to maintain our objectivity and keep our perspective. All this took was some time on our part. The biggest out-of-pocket were our economy seats on Alaska Airlines and one night at the Fifth Avenue Suites. We're talking shoestring. And best of all, we paid nothing for the information received during the process. Ultimately, our vision of an apartment community evolved into a 301-unit condominium conversion project. The research we did took our vision of an ordinary project and made it extraordinary. We were able to redevelop an area, deliver exactly what the area needed, and give the city and the people what they wanted. I don't buy anything without first researching the market. Even in Phoenix, which is a market I know extremely well, I do research before I buy anything. Things change. Markets and submarkets go in and out of favor. Big projects like highways change the patterns and flows of a city. There's always something. Today, thanks for the internet, research is easy and takes virtually no time. Everything is online and available. For as difficult as researching that first college term paper was, this is a breeze. And there's never been more writing than getting an A. Next time you drive to work, take your son or daughter to school, or race down a highway you've traveled hundreds of times, look to the right and the left. Maybe I should say glance. Repeatedly, it's safer that way. What I mean is this: take time to really look around. After all, you pass by the same houses, same stores, same apartment buildings, the same office parks every day, right? First impressions and outward appearances of cities or towns and the neighborhoods within them, also called markets and submarkets, can be very deceiving. You've heard the saying, and it's true. A lot of swampland gets sold to unsuspecting buyers, not just in Florida, but in every city and town across America. Every town has a swampland. You know, it's the investment that sucks up all your resources and offers nothing in return. Let's face it, getting people to venture into murky water is a lot more challenging with alligators looking around. If we learn anything from all those poor people who have purchased swampland with the hopes of striking it rich, we should take away one lesson. The market is more important than the property. I'm always amazed at how much there is to know about a specific market or even a small submarket, just a few blocks in size. What you see on the surface is just the beginning. And just when you think you know an area well, something changes. In this video, I'll show you how to get beyond the appearances, avoid the swamps, and see the true picture of a submarket and its smaller submarkets. And in the process, you'll gain objectivity, a very good thing indeed when it comes to real estate investing. The three drivers of supply and demand. Supply is defined as the number of rental properties available in a market or a submarket. Ideally, supply should be low and demand should be high. Demand is defined as the number of people looking to rent. Supply is easy to determine. In Portland, we asked our emerging team, specifically brokers, property managers. They had detailed data, including property names, sizes, addresses, and dates of construction. Seek out this help. Why do all this work on your own? Demand, on the other hand, is a bit trickier. I estimate demand based on occupancy rates in the area. If a submarket has high occupancy, demand is great. If occupancy is low, demand is soft. If there are a lot of move-in specials advertised, demand is low. If rental properties are offering no incentives at all, demand is high. These are some outward signs. Another factor to consider when determining supply and demand is future supply. By future supply, I mean any and all new rental property that is in the various stages of development, from planning to permitting to construction. Future supply is a critical indicator of how properties in the area will perform long term. If through your research you find that supply is greater than demand, you may want to stay away or at least keep looking for a better market. Your job of finding residents, generating cash flow, and increasing the profitability of a property will be more difficult. And remember, the value of a rental property increases based on the operations and cash flow. In Portland, demand in the River District submarket we chose for our waterfront project certainly exceeded the existing supply. We knew that based on our face-to-face meetings and the fact that nothing was available in the area to rent. But by contrast, in the small mountain community of Fountain Hills, Arizona, the opposite is true. Here, rental properties, including large apartment communities and uncountable numbers of duplexes, condos, and single-family homes, they seem to be everywhere. Many were purchased by hopeful investors, and now they are competing head-to-head for a relatively small number of renters. The reasons for this lopsided market state are no mystery. Rather, they are totally explainable. Employment. This is the first and possibly the most important indicator of demand, and for a good reason. If a market or a submarket has lots of jobs, people will come to fill those jobs. Very basic stuff. It is a fact that jobs drive residency. With all things being equal, property that is near to employment is in greater demand. That's not to say that people won't drive to live in a highly desirable city or town, or that people won't drive to their job, but just be aware of the market condition. When you're looking for indicators of supply and demand, look at employment. In the case of Fountain Hills, Arizona, there is little to no employment base at all. Nearly everyone who lives in the town who is of working age works elsewhere, like neighboring Scottsdale. Scottsdale, by contrast, has many employers. Both Fountain Hills and Scottsdale are desirable places to live, and both communities are beautiful places with excellent qualities of life. But Scottsdale wins in terms of employment and therefore in terms of demand. People have to really want to live in Fountain Hills, and many do. But the lack of a large employer or large office complex that brings workers to the town means that Fountain Hills will find it difficult to balance the supply and demand for rental properties for years to come. Create jobs and people will come. High employment can be beneficial for rental property investments, but be sure to look at the whole picture. Even communities with lots of jobs can still be overbuilt, thus throwing off the delicate balance of supply and demand. Scottsdale has been smart to limit the supply of rental properties. That has helped keep the vacancies low and the rents high. Fountain Hills, with its plentiful land by contrast, allowed the construction of too many rental units, and therefore vacancies are higher and rents are lower. Fountain Hills could have been a premium rental community, even without a strong employment base, and once was before the boom in rental properties occurred in the mid to late 90s. After all, the town is a tremendous draw for winter visitors and part-time residents, a good market for rental communities. Employment stability is also something to consider. As you evaluate your market and your submarket for employment, look at how stable the employment base is. Are the companies reputable? Are their products and services in ever-growing demand? Is the mix of companies diversified? These are indicators of stability. Just look at Houston in the 1980s. Rental properties were booming, and then the oil industry came crashing down, taking with it banks, hotels, home building companies, and numerous other businesses. Apartments were vacant all over town. So to lure renters, owners and property managers were offering ridiculous move-in packages, including 6 months free rent, free televisions, and no security deposits. A significant drop in the local employment had a significant impact on the economy. Population. You've already established that you need a stable and growing employment base, so it makes sense that you'd also want to be in an area where there are lots of people. People who are your future customers. That may be a bit cut and dried for the new investor who's thinking about taking advantage of a great deal on a single-family home out on the outskirts of town, off the beaten path. While it may seem like a wonderful property and seem like a great deal, that's meaningless if nobody is around to lease it. In this video, you'll find that once the market is selected, the key to success is in the property itself, and the valuation is a function of the operations. How well it operates now and how well it operates in the future will determine the value. By operations, I mean how much income the property generates, what the expenses are, and what the overall profitability is. Operational success in this business relies on the market of renters. If you've ever been to Venice Beach in California, you'll know that it's a submarket of Los Angeles market and that it has a definite persona or living experience. First of all, it's a California beach town that conjures up all the fun and freedom that the California Office of Tourism, Hollywood, and the Beach Boys spent decades promoting through commercials, movies, and songs. Lots of people are drawn to this lifestyle and the persona of what living in Venice Beach means. Contrast that with the Phoenix submarket of Dobson Ranch. There are rental properties in this master plan community, but the area has no real persona that drives the multitudes to it. Sure, it's a nice place to live and a great place for family, but there's no major image that draws the population. I'm sure most everyone watching this video has never even heard of it. Whistler, British Columbia is another example, and the name is almost synonymous with skiing and a stunning alpine scenery. Gig Harbor, Washington is a mecca for boating enthusiasts. Aspen, Colorado is a place to ski and be seen. And finally, Scottsdale, Arizona is known for sun, golf, spas, and shopping. These are famous places that possess personas, but there are other less famous areas in every community that have unique personas and living experience that are known to those who live in the region. Take some lesser known areas in Arizona. Litchfield Park, which was once known as the location of Luke Air Force Base, and a lot of farms. It is now readily known in the Phoenix metro area as a boom town, with lots of development, a sports arena complex in neighboring Glendale, and retail everywhere you turn. Mill Avenue, a submarket of Tempe, Arizona, is well known for youthful happening artistic college center. Do you understand through these examples the concept of persona and living experience? Places that have clearly defined personas are population draws, as almost as powerful as employment. Talk to your city or your town officials, visit their websites, and set up meetings. Remember, as a taxpayer, you are paying their salaries. You are their customer. Do whatever it takes to get realistic population projections, and when they rattle off blue sky numbers, ask them to elaborate on the factors that they see are contributing to this optimistic growth scenario. In addition to employment and town personas, as population draws, your contacts may also refer to the following: new highways or highway extensions. These create new traffic patterns and transform areas that once seemed a long distance away into places that suddenly seem close by. If a new highway project is slated near a single-family home or an off-beaten path that we talked about earlier, it may not be such a bad investment opportunity after all. New sports stadiums and arenas. So often the hub of an urban redevelopment is a sports stadium or arena complex. These facilities bring tens of thousands of people to an area and open up all kinds of opportunities for investment real estate. The Phoenix Coyotes hockey arena, as well as the Cardinal Stadium in Glendale, have been two of the most important projects in a recent emergence of neighboring Litchfield Park, the boomtown we talked about earlier. Universities and university expansions. Universities are always population drivers because just by the nature of what they do, they bring a steady stream of students, faculty, and the supporting businesses to an area. The Mill Avenue submarket of Tempe that we spoke of earlier is walking distance to Arizona State University. Redevelopment areas. Our River District project in Portland is an excellent example of a redevelopment area. This ideal central location, community goodwill, and an aura of coolness often associated with a redevelopment makes these kinds of projects population magnets. People love the wow factor associated with before and after stories. Casinos. Casinos bring with them the masses who every weekend and a lot of weeknights want to try their luck and win big bucks. They say that in the gold rush of 1849, the people who made money were the ones who housed the miners and sold them goods. The same is true here, except the gamblers at the slots were the modern-day miners. Regional airports. Scottsdale Airport is a prime example of how valuable real estate can be around airports. The Scottsdale Air Park is a haven for small business and a real driver of rental communities and single-family homes in the area. A brand new highway linking the airport to the rest of the Phoenix metro area didn't hurt either. Company relocations. When Boeing moved from Seattle to Chicago, With it went thousands of jobs. Bad for Seattle, great for Chicago. Corporate relocations are instant population boosters. Major events. The 1962 World's Fair redeveloped downtown Seattle, and the legacy of that event, of course, is the Space Needle, which is still a tourist attraction decades later. Projects and developments such as these tend to reshape the face of a community, and change of this type is potentially lucrative for real estate investors. But there are also a few things that you should watch out for. Make sure that the growth of a submarket or a market isn't too heavily reliant on one thing. In other words, if one employer is responsible for nearly all the population in a given area, think twice about investing. If the employer moves, so will your market. Economic diversity. I steer clear of areas that don't have a good, diverse economy. It's happened before, and it'll happen again, that an entire market falls victim to an industry sector that goes bust. It happened in Pittsburgh, Houston, it happened in Detroit, and it most recently happened in the San Francisco Bay Area after the last dot-com bust. Affordability. I always look at the affordability of housing in a particular market. If a single-family home is out of reach for most people, apartment living becomes a valuable option. This is the case in big cities like New York and San Francisco, which attract large populations, most of whom cannot afford to own homes. Look for markets where the cost of home ownership far exceeds the cost of renting. Location. Location is the most important thing when it comes to real estate. At least that's what everyone says, and I have to agree. But to me, locations have to be evaluated not based on the geography alone, but based on how they measure up in relation to supply and demand. After a location has met the criteria of being in an area with good employment prospects and a growing population, I look for a few important physical features that experience has shown to be valuable. Great locations have drive-by visibility. The more cars that pass by your property and see your for rent sign, the better your chances of success. Drive-bys are one of the most effective forms of advertising and certainly one of the most cost-efficient. When your property is on a street with no traffic, you'll have to resort to more expensive and less effective methods of advertising. This almost inevitably reduces your profitability because lower occupancy means lower cash flows. There's a one-of-a-kind quality about great locations that you can't find anywhere. Our Portland project was one of the only waterfront properties left in a wildly popular area. It was an island waiting to be found. That's the rare quality I'm talking about. Great locations are in demand. Some investors think they can't afford even to look at a property in hot locations. I hear this all the time. But the truth is, affordability is everywhere, even in the hottest neighborhoods, if you buy the property based on operational performance and not on the sale price. Take another look at these three characteristics of great locations, and what you'll find is that they all add up to one simple truth. Great locations are low in supply and high in demand. This is at the heart of your market evaluation. Be realistic with your analysis and look at the future of the market and have a keen eye on the present. Property investing should pay off now and later. The first step in buying right is knowing your market better than anyone else. After all the evaluation is said and done, you should be armed with the information you need to narrow your market. In an earlier video, we talked about goal setting. I put forth an example of the goal of finding an 8-unit property in Phoenix. The goal was as follows. We will acquire one 8-unit property in that metro area within the next 12 months that will generate at least $4,000 of average annual income over the next 5 years. After listening to this video, you should now be thinking that your metro area as a market is way too broad, that it should be narrowed considerably. As you learn more about your own market, you will find yourself continually refining your goal and your search. That's perfectly fine. The gradual focusing is necessary, and those who can't do it effectively find this work, well, a lot of work. So let's now define our market to Scottsdale. That's much better. And we'll focus it even further to the Old Town area of Scottsdale. I know now that my property choices will be in the hundreds, not the tens of thousands. Do you see what I mean by a lot of work? Focusing your market makes things manageable. In good deals, the numbers work. Someone once told me that the average person remembers only 3 to 5 concepts in a business book. Just 3 to 5. I know already in this series there have been a dozen concepts presented. So which ones are going to be remembered and which ones are going to be forgotten? I found this statement hard to believe until I started to think back on the books that I had read recently. And I had to admit that if I remember 3 concepts in each of them, I was lucky. I'm not going to assume that with this series, I'm going to change the comprehension rate of the typical human. And I'm not going to take it personally if after watching this series, you don't retain every single thing. But I will be disappointed if you don't remember the concepts in this video. In fact, if you forget everything else you learn in this series, this is the one video I hope you not only remember, but refer to often. Because if you master the process I'm revealing to you in this information ahead, your life as an investor in rental property will be infinitely easier. Infinitely. It's true that your success in your business is a result of your preparation. That's the message and purpose of the earlier videos of this series. But regardless of how prepared you are, you can create a disaster for yourself in a matter of seconds if you can't tell a diamond from a cubic zirconium. That's the time it takes to sign your name on the dotted line of a bad deal. I know that sounds pretty scary. There's a little gray area separating a good deal from a bad one. And to me, gray area is made up of black and white. A deal is either good or bad. And fortunately, a bad one is easy to find. It is simply a deal where the numbers don't work. In other words, it's when the projected cash flow, income minus total expenses, equals a low or negative number. In good deals, the numbers work. The 5-step property evaluation. It's called a 5-step property evaluation, and I've used it for the past 15 years with outstanding results. In a nutshell, it's number 1, verify the income. Number 2, verify expenses. Number 3, determine the net operating income. Number 4, find the capitalization rate and valuation. And number 5, calculate the loan payment and your profit or cash on cash. I use those 5 steps to come up with the initial cash flow for the property and arrive at an offer price. To do that, we look at everything associated with expenses, including our loan payments and everything associated with income during our analysis. You'll realize the importance of this process when you think of it this way. Would you put your money into a mutual fund without looking at a past earnings performance? Would you put your money in an annuity if you didn't know the annual interest rate? Probably not. Well, why invest in real estate without a reasonable estimate of what your return might be? In real estate investing, return on investment is also called cash on cash. And it's your net cash flow as a percentage of your down payment. If you put $100,000 down on a property and it brings in $1,000 of income per month, your cash on cash is 12% per year. Not bad, but if that same property brought in $500 per month, your 6% return may not seem worth your time. As you continue to listen, you'll see why it's too early to make that judgment. Furthermore, the process I will describe in the video will enable you to value property without actually doing a physical inspection. In over 95% of the offers we make, I do not visit the community before I complete a valuation and make an offer. What could I really gain by doing a property visit that I couldn't learn from the seller at this point? If I personally visited every single property my company is considering, we would be forever visiting properties and have no time left to actually purchase them. At this stage, I rely on my team to fill in any gaps I may have in my knowledge about the property. Previously, we opened escrow on a 172-unit apartment building in Glendale, Arizona. I had one of my team members visit the property while we reviewed the numbers. The negotiation lasted about 3 weeks as we went back and forth on the offer price. The figures we used for our valuation came entirely from the seller and the broker that was listing the property. Don't misunderstand. I will not buy the property without walking each and every unit, performing a thorough inspection, and verifying the numbers. I just let my team do a lot of the preliminary screening for me. Another property in the works right now is in San Diego. We're in the second round of negotiation, and I've yet to actually visit the property. This shows the level of confidence I have in my partners and in my team members. They feel good about the property, so I feel good about the property. I trust them implicitly on what could be a $66 million acquisition. My point with these two stories is that offers are nothing more than an opportunity to look at the numbers and make an educated guess about how a property will perform in terms of cash flow, based on a brief top-line evaluation. As you'll see later in the video, you'll find out about the property in minute detail once you tie up the property by actually getting it under contract. That's when you begin the inspection period known as due diligence. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's take a look at the 5-step property valuation that will give us the information that we need to say go or no go to a property investment. So the step 1 is to verify the property income. Even if the seller discloses the current income on a rental property either through a pro forma document or verbally, you need to verify it. Property income is the first and perhaps the most important factor when it comes to buying an investment property. Unlike your primary residential mortgage, which the bank secures with your own assets, rental investment property loans are most often secured by the income-generating potential of the property itself. And if you don't verify the income right up front, you'll have to do it later for the bank. So there's no time like the present. And this one variable will tell you without going any further whether this property is worth any more of your time. Before we go into it too far, let's define some terms. There are 3 types of income to actually consider with any property: actual income, actual potential income, and future potential income. Actual income, the total income of the property generated in the prior 12 months. Actual potential income, the total income of the property could have generated in the prior 12 months had all the units been 100% occupied and had the owner taken advantage of all the other income opportunities. Future potential income, the total income the property could generate at today's market rents, 100% occupancy, and taking full advantage of all the other income opportunities. Traditionally, many property owners will try to sell their property based on the future potential income. It is in your best interest to buy it at actual income. That's the way I like to buy, based on the way the property is currently running and the amount of money it's currently making. I think of it as wholesale. If you buy a property based on how it could run and the income it could generate in the future, that future potential income, I call that buying retail. Try to avoid retail purchases at all costs. Buying right means buying at wholesale. When you buy wholesale, your mortgage is lower, and right out of the gate, that means you'll maximize your profitability on the property itself. With the important distinction between retail and wholesale out in the open, trust but verify all the numbers listed on the back of the sales brochures you get from the brokers and the sellers. These sales brochures have a fairly standard format. Usually on the front, there's a photo of the building, and on the back, there are lots of numbers that depict the property's operational performance. You simply cannot accept those numbers as fact, since they are often inflated. Before you start a rumor that Ken McElroy is a broker hater, know that at the bottom of every sales brochure I've ever seen are these words: "This brokerage company makes no warranty or representation about the content of this brochure. It is your responsibility to independently confirm its accuracy, its competencies. Any projections, opinions, assumptions, or estimates used, for example, only and do not represent the current or future performance of the property." This disclaimer makes it pretty clear that a smart investor must verify each and every number in this brochure. If you don't, they are basically saying, with this one statement, it's your own fault. So here's how you verify the income from the numbers on a typical property pro forma in a sales brochure. The information I'll use in this example is from an actual property in Phoenix, Arizona. Let's start with the unit mix and the rent schedule. Unit mix and rent schedule. The unit mix and rent schedule is a table that is usually in a rental property brochure pro formas. It lists the number of units, the type, the square footage, and the rent. Its purpose is to give you a picture of the income by unit and overall for the property. Here's an example right here of a property, its unit types, its square footage, and its rent. And this is an 8-unit property. As you can see, the current rents average $480 for the 2-bedroom units and $422 for the 1-bedroom units. I use unit mix and rent schedule tables to verify the rental income on properties. And from my experience, I have yet to ever find one in a pro forma that accurately depicts the actual income picture. That's why it's important for you to know how to read and analyze this information. So let's look a little bit closer. With this information, the owner is telling you that the total rent for the 8 units on this property is $4,000 per month based on the rents as listed in the total rent column. But on this particular table, the seller put asterisks next to the rents and indicate that the actual rents are lower. That's a good thing for you because sometimes that never happens. But these are significantly lower. See the small print. And an inexperienced buyer might look at this table and conclude that the $4,000 is the actual income of the property. But the fact is, and by the seller's own admission, which is rare by the way, that this $4,000 figure is the future potential income based on the higher rents, which may or may not be at the market rent levels. Let's see how the income picture changes when we insert into the table the actual rents for this property. Now that the actual rent numbers are in this table, it is clear that the rents used by this seller or broker were a full $63 per unit higher than what the property is actually generating. Over a 12-month period, that equates to $6,048. If you would have bought this property based on the seller's pro forma, your income would have been more than $6,000 below what you expected. That is not good. But what if the seller doesn't reveal the actual rent numbers in the small print on a brochure pro forma? And they usually aren't. Then you must request a rent roll and use those numbers for your own calculations. You should even verify the small print rents on a brochure such as this one by comparing them to the actual rent roll. Remember, trust but verify. So what about vacancies and other income? At this point, we have verified the actual potential income for the property. Remember, that's the income the property could generate at current rents with 100% occupancy. But certainly, it is highly unlikely that this property will or will ever be 100% occupied every day of every year from now until eternity. So we have to take into account vacancy and turnover from residents moving in and out. And while we're at it, we should consider any other income generated from the sources like laundry facilities, parking, and so on. The typical pro forma lists these values as well. And surprise, these numbers too I have found to be inaccurate most of the time. Vacancies are usually understated, and the other income is usually overinflated. The key here is to try to project what the vacancies and the other income will be in the future. Common sense will tell you that if an apartment is not rented, it is not producing income, and that reduces your cash flow. Even if the vacancy rate is listed on the top of the pro forma, verify it with the property manager on your team. He or she will be able to tell you if the vacancy rate listed is at, above, or below the average of the market. And we'll know this because vacancies are mostly a function of supply and demand within the market. The income section on the pro forma is where the seller lists the property's income and the vacancy rate. It shows the income from rent, minus the average vacancy for the property and adds it to the other income the property generates. This is a real-world example, which contains numbers directly from the property in Phoenix. The seller or the broker is reporting total income for the property to be $45,120 a year using a 7% vacancy and $480 in other income. That seems pretty good, but look at the rent figure. It's based on the inflated rent numbers listed in the unit mix and the rent schedule. You remember those. They were the ones with asterisks. That's not good. Take a look below at what happens to our total income when we insert the real rents in the projected column. Keep in mind the rent value is the only thing we have changed in this analysis. The total income from the property falls by $5,669. That's a lot of money. Now look at the three figures for the total income. The seller pro forma number of $45,120, the prior year actual number of $41,800, and our projected number of $39,451. First, let's compare the seller pro forma income number with the prior year actual number. What this tells you is that the reported seller pro forma number is $3,320 more than the income from the prior year. The seller is implying that you can improve the operation from what it was last year, and they don't even know what kind of manager you'll be. This isn't flattery, it's more like a fast one. As I'm sure you've guessed, when I formulate my offer, I disregard the other two income numbers and use my own projected figure, the one that takes into account the real property rents. The best part of this strategy is that because the numbers are real, they are easy to defend during the negotiation process. This is how easy it is to verify income and how easy it is to catch these kinds of inconsistencies in the numbers. As I mentioned, income is often inflated. So don't be shocked if the difference between the numbers on your pro forma and the numbers that you project are in the thousands. That's common. And before we leave this topic of income, let's address future potential income. Recall that future potential income is the total income the property could generate at today's market rents, 100% occupancy, and by taking full advantage of all the other income opportunities. You may find through your income verification process that the reported rents are well below the market. This could be your Advance the Boardwalk card, so keep it close to your vest. It's this kind of upside potential that property investors dream about. With income verified, it's now time to turn your attention to expenses. Verifying expenses. Expenses are the second important variable to consider. As I mentioned earlier, the definition of net operating income is income minus expenses. In the previous section, we showed you the specifics you need to review to estimate the income potential of a property. In this section, you'll see how to assess the expenses. Just as we did to verify income, you'll want to get a picture of the current expenses. Unlike the income calculation, where your goal was to be 100% on the money in terms of accuracy, with expenses, the goal is to get extremely close. We'll find out all the minute details later in the game. This is another area where your team of pros can help you. Regardless of whether you'll be using a property management company or not, calling one to visit the property and help you assess everything involved in running the place is a good idea, particularly if you are looking at a multi-unit building. Just call and say, I'm looking at buying an 8-unit building and I'm not sure if I want to run it myself or hire a company to do it. I'd like to show you the building and talk with you about it. The hour or so that you spend with the property management representative will be a good investment of time. And if you have to pay that person an hourly consulting fee, it's worth it. Just make the objective of the meeting twofold. First, you want to learn what it will take to run the property, and second, you want to get an insight on how to minimize the expenses. Keep in mind at this point in the process, your goal is to get an idea of the ongoing services and repairs, as well as upgrades the building may need. Later in the process, you'll go into a lot more detail. This is the time to put rough numbers on paper and analyze if the cost of the needed repairs will still allow you to be profitable. This is the real balancing act between spending enough to get the place in shape and overspending. Again, your property management representative can help you determine many of these costs. The goal of this entire exercise is to get a picture of where your expenses are and to try to find out ways to do things better, smarter, and for less money. Try to reduce those expenses, which will increase your net operating income and your own profitability. So what are the expenses? To answer that, let's turn to the pro forma expense table. It shows the seller anticipated expenses for the coming year and the actual expenses for the prior year. Here's what this table looks like for the property in Phoenix that we're using as a real-world example. Repairs and maintenance, utilities, real estate taxes, insurance, replacement reserve, total expenses. Let's analyze these figures in much more detail and add our projected expenses. First, we'll look at repairs and maintenance. The first thing that caught my eye on this table was that the seller pro forma value was lower than the prior year actuals. For some reason, this seller or broker wants the buyers to believe that the repairs and maintenance will actually go down. In fact, the seller predicts repairs and maintenance to go down by over $1,300 from the actual prior year costs. Here's the rule of thumb. As properties age, repair, and maintenance costs go up, common sense says expenses in the coming year will be the same or more. We'll keep it simple from here. For purposes of my projections, I will use the prior year actual number of $8,010, knowing that this number could be low. Time will tell. Next, we'll look at the utilities. The seller's pro forma utilities figure appears to be in line with the actual expenses from the prior year. But let me caution you that the utilities normally have standard rate increases from year to year. In this pro forma, the seller projects no increases. For now, we'll use the seller pro forma number, but you can get a very realistic projection simply by contacting the utility companies and giving them the address of the property. How about the next line in our expense table? Real estate taxes. Real estate tax expenses are simple to determine with almost pinpoint accuracy. The data is usually available on the internet in most areas. Simply go to the county assessor website and locate the property search area of the site. Then just type in the property address to get the current figures. In most cases, you'll see not only the prior year property tax amounts, but also the projections for 1 or 2 years out. Focus on the future and use the next year's assessment as your projection. Understand that property sales often trigger tax increases, so you may want to consult with your real estate tax team member about this. For the purpose of the expense evaluation, I'll just say I found the seller's figures to be accurate. Next is the insurance expense line. Insurance is a fast-moving business, and rates can vary widely from company to company, state to state, city to city. My suggestion is that you get a couple of insurance agents to bid on the property and use that number in your projections. As your business grows, you can bundle all your properties under a bulk insurance program, which generates substantial savings. We do this and secure bids annually. For our expense analysis on the Phoenix property, we will increase our projected figure based on my personal experience. Finally, we'll look at replacement reserve. The replacement reserve are the funds that you put aside for inevitable replacement of capital items, such as appliances, carpets, countertops, roofs, and so on. I get really nervous when I see that the seller did not spend a dime on the property in the prior year, as this table indicates. Moreover, the broker or the seller projected an additional $1,200 for the new buyer, and trust me, this is no gift. This tells me that the property has some deferred maintenance, and it's probably more than $1,200. For purposes of this offer, I will keep the number at $1,200 for now, but after I walk the property, I may have a different opinion. At this point, we have the numbers we need to complete our analysis. To do this, we get out our calculator and run the expense totals. Keep in mind that we haven't visited the property, and once we do, we may adjust these numbers again based on what we find during our inspections. Here are our totals. Take a look at the total expense line and to see how the numbers differ. As you can see, the range is significant, from $15,573 to $17,083. That's a $1,500 difference between our projected expenses to operate the property and the seller's pro forma expenses. Had you bought this property without going through this exercise, that's $1,500 may have been money right off of your bottom line. Step number 3, determine the net operating income. After you have determined your income potential for the property and you have a good estimate of the expenses, you need to determine the net operating income, or the NOI. This is a very important number because you will eventually base your offer on it. To calculate it, you simply subtract your expenses from the income. Hopefully you end up with a large positive number. The larger the better. But before you get too excited when you see the number, which is one indicator of net cash flow, remember that this number does not include your loan payment. The loan payment will be determined by how much you pay for the property, your down payment, and the interest rate. Now is the easy part. Take your projected total income of $39,451, subtract your projected total expenses of $17,083 to get your net operating income, or NOI, of $22,368. Now let's look at NOI a bit closer to portray the full picture. This table reveals a brutal fact. The seller's pro forma net operating income number is a full $7,179 higher than our projected net operating income, or $29,547 minus $22,368. This is a significant difference and would certainly have set up an unsuspecting buyer for failure. I'll say again, net operating income is a very important number, and in a few minutes, you'll see why. Step 4, capitalization rate and value. What is a capitalization rate? I know you're thinking this is starting to sound complicated, definitely third-year college accounting. Allow me to explain. First, it sounds way more complicated than it is. In numerical terms, the capitalization rate is just the net operating income divided by the purchase price. So now you're thinking, Ken, how can I calculate the capitalization rate when I don't have a purchase price yet? That's what I'm trying to figure out through this whole exercise, after all. Don't tell me algebra is involved. No, algebra is not involved. This is actually very easy. The purchase price here is actually the purchase price trends for a comparable building in your market. So this very complicated sounding word is actually something you can get very easily from brokers, real estate agents, or even the pro forma document for your property. The people in the business, your team members, will either know the capitalization rate for your market or they'll help you calculate it. That's all there is to it. To determine how much the property is actually worth, in other words, the property's valuation, you just simply divide the net operating income by the capitalization rate. The number you arrive at is the valuation. It was called purchase price in the previous formula, and the valuation is your initial offer. So let's continue with our real-world example. The capitalization rate used in the Phoenix property pro forma was 8.74%, a standard rate used by the broker. At this stage, I'll just use the capitalization rate provided. There's no point in going through a lot of effort to do otherwise until much later. An NOI of $22,368 divided by the capitalization rate of 8.74% is $255,926. So the offer should be no more than $256,000. We've arrived. We have an offer price. But yes, there's something missing. Oh yes, you're probably wondering what the seller's asking price was on this property, and I won't keep you in suspense. The asking price was $338,000. Here's an indication of how high that price is. If you purchased the property with a down payment of 10%, this would have equated to a loan of $25,524 using a 7.5% interest rate. Remember our projected NOI? Let me refresh your memory. It was $22,368. Can you see the problem with this? The income falls well short of even covering your loan. Let alone anything else, had you bought the property at the list price of $338,000 or even at $300,000, you would have been in a negative cash flow situation immediately. And just in case you're thinking that I pulled our example pro forma from a small-time brokerage company that was unsophisticated, guess again. It was quite the opposite. This pro forma was prepared and distributed by one of the nation's top brokers. Step 5, the loan payment and profit. Assuming you and the seller agree to the purchase price of $256,000, now is the time to figure out what the loan payment will be. This is where your finance team member or your broker could step in. But I did it myself in a matter of seconds. I just went online and typed into my Google search engine the words mortgage payment, and up popped numerous mortgage calculators. I entered 2 numbers, the loan amount and the interest rate. Instantaneously, the mortgage payment schedule appeared. I love the 21st century. Back to our real-world example. The numbers I used were based on an offer price and 10% or $25,600 down and the same interest rate of 7.5%. The mortgage calculator churned out a loan payment of $20,010. Certainly a more palatable number when you consider your projected net operating income was only $22,368. The very last step is to find out your actual profit by subtracting your loan payment from your projected net operating income. Using the net operating income of $22,368 and subtracting the loan payment of $20,010, the projected profit on this property is $2,358. Is that good or bad? Well, here's how you know. You calculate your cash on cash, which, as you recall, is a lot like a return on investment. To calculate your cash on cash, divide your profit of $2,358 by the down payment of $25,600. For this deal, your cash on cash return is 9.2%. Not a bad return. Congratulations. If you purchase this property for $256,000 with a 10% down, your return on investment will be 9.2%. So the last video was all about determining the valuation of a property. In essence, building your buying case. The 5-step property evaluation is like embarking on a fact-finding mission where you'll search for the information you'll need to create a snapshot of the property. I say snapshot because you really won't know everything there is to know about the property. You may even have an idea of how it will perform in the future, but you'll know far less than 100% of all there is to know. And that's okay. At least the picture is concrete and real, based on numbers and facts. There will be time to find out all the details during the due diligence phase. Commitments are tough for me anyway. Just ask my girlfriend. Although thanks to her, I learned many years ago how to recognize a good thing when I saw one. The same is true for a property. I've gotten much better at taking the leap toward commitment, particularly if I follow one simple rule. When I know 70% of everything there is to know about a property, that's enough to make a decision. To me, 60% is too little, and if I wait till I know 90%, someone has either beaten me to the punch or I fall into the trap of never having enough information to make a decision. As I like to say, analysis paralysis. Looking back, I probably didn't know 70% of all there was to know about my girlfriend when I made the big commitment. You might say, I got lucky. Don't try your luck on real estate. Before we go any further, I want to point out that if after your analysis you don't think the property is a good investment, in other words, if the net cash flow is too low, then you may need to walk away from the deal or offer a much lower price to make the numbers work. Every step in this process is a learning experience, And with every exercise, every calculation, every building walkthrough, you're getting smarter and smarter. The next time you'll be twice as fast and 3 times more thorough. Learning is never a waste of time. I walk away from most deals at this critical point. I make this statement because by now most people are emotionally involved in the property and the process, and they are reluctant to say no go to a deal. It takes me about 30 minutes to do a 5-step property valuation once I have all the information. I use the numbers and my common sense to move to the next deal. And if the one I'm working on doesn't jibe, I move on. Should you decide the property still looks like a good idea, you'll find your high level of preparation will put you in an excellent position for a negotiation because you have all the numbers and all the facts. And believe me, the numbers and the facts take emotion right out of the process. But let's be real. There may be some hostility on the part of the seller who thinks the property is worth far more than you've shown it to actually be. That happens often. But the difference is that armed with the numbers, you are not waltzing into the seller's office making an arbitrarily low offer. Instead, you are coming in with a well-prepared case based on research and facts. Now is the time to convince the seller to sell the property to you. When you feel good about the numbers and arrive at the decision to buy, you have reached a milestone. In this phase of the process, the goal is to tie up the property. As soon as the property and sale agreement is signed, the property is no longer available to any other competitive bidders. The quicker you can tie up the property, the better chance you have of closing the deal at your price. That's why I try to complete the steps in the last chapter within 48 hours of receiving all the necessary information. It's taken me years to get that process streamlined, but I've also won several deals thanks to our speed. Regardless of whether it takes you 2 days or 2 weeks, once you make the decision to buy, there's a standard protocol for buying an investment property. Remember, the goal is to tie up the property. And during that time, you negotiate the terms of the sale, and equally as important, review the property and its operations in its finest detail. By the time you are done, you may find your offer was too high and needs adjustment. Or you may find that it was right on the money. This is typical of larger deals and characteristics of how purchases happen in many states. But every state is different, so consult your team members, your attorney, your real estate agent, your broker on this one. Regardless of the vehicle, the deal points that you must work through during this process are the same. Don't worry so much about the vehicle, whether it's a letter of intent or a standard purchase and sale agreement from the National Association of Realtors. Be more aware of the deal points within it. The purpose of an LOI is to save the legal expenses with regard to the purchase and sale agreement. Once you've established the valuation using the 5 steps in the last video, you are ready to draft a letter of intent or purchase and sale agreement. I prefer to use a standard letter of intent to map out the deal points between myself and the seller before moving into a formal purchase and sale contract. Letters of intent save me lots of money in attorney's fees because attorneys are not usually involved in letters of intent. Further, the work done during this process makes the actual contract smoother and faster. The letter of intent contains your offer along with the basic deal points like the down payment, the due diligence time frame, the escrow amount, and the financing contingencies. We'll get to contingencies in a minute, but for now you can see why it's a good idea to have your team in place early. The last thing you want to do at this stage of the game is begin relationships with banks, with title companies, and investors. You want the relationships to be established. Time is of the essence. Get your letter of intent out as quickly as possible so you can agree on the basic terms of the deal and tie up the building. In high-demand markets, time is not your friend, so I typically email the document to the seller. Letters of intent are like a proposal you send to a seller. They are designed to be negotiated and the original document you send over is the starting point. The seller will review the offer and the terms and will usually counter the offer and adjust some kind of terms. This is a back and forth process, so don't be surprised if it takes weeks to accomplish. This is normal. 6 things every LOI or letter of intent should include. Number 1, the property information. Number 2, the purchase price. Number 3, the deposit. Number 4, the financing information. Number 5, the due diligence information. And number 6, time frames. Once both the buyer and the seller agree upon the terms in the signed letter of intent, you are ready for your attorney to draft up the purchase and sale agreement. Or you can use a standard form from an agency you may be working with. This is where you communicate all the specifics of the sale. In other words, you list exactly what each party is going to be doing to complete the deal. Purchase and sale agreements always spell out how the seller will provide information on the property's current operations. They list critical dates, including when your deposit becomes non-refundable, and when the due diligence evaluation period ends, and your closing date. Contingencies. Your attorney will help advise you about contingencies. Contingencies are provisions within a contract that give you recourse to cancel the deal in the event of unforeseen circumstances. A few examples of typical contingency statements include loan contingencies and due diligence contingencies. These are critical, and I recommend that they are in every single purchase and sale agreement. A loan contingency states that the sale is contingent on you qualifying for the loan. This gives you an out should the lender refuse to finance the deal. I won't do a contract that doesn't have a loan contingency. We were property managing a project where a buyer put a deposit of $200,000 in earnest money on a property, and he did not have a loan contingency. He didn't get the loan. The sad story is that he lost $200,000. True story. Due diligence contingencies are equally as important. This language in the purchase and sale agreement states that you as the buyer are entitled to any and all documents related to the property. It also states that you as the buyer may ask any questions about the property and that you are due answers from the seller to the best of his or her knowledge in a timely manner. As you will come to find out in the next video, the results of the due diligence process are ultimately what decides your purchase or decline of the property. They also help you formulate your property plan and your operating budget. 2 steps critical in maximizing your investment. This clause ensures that you get all the information you need. Critical dates: negotiating the PSA, signing the agreement, in Webster's dictionary, the definition of diligent is prosecuted with careful attention and effort. But it's really the synonyms for the word that reveal exactly what is expected during the due diligence period when purchasing investment real estate. The synonyms for diligent include conscientious, thorough, careful, thoughtful, attentive, and meticulous. That is exactly how you need to behave when you do due diligence on a property. You need to perform thorough walkthroughs of every apartment unit. You need to pay careful attention to every detail. You need to be thoughtful about how you can improve the property and cut expenses. You need to be attentive to the tasks and deliver them on time, and you need to be meticulous in your evaluation and your reporting. Thanks, Webster. I couldn't have said it any better myself. And that's really what due diligence is. It is your time to take a thorough look at everything pertaining to the property and report the good, the bad, and the ugly. It's the time when you make detailed assessments of actual costs for property improvements, ongoing maintenance, and the operations. It's your last chance to make sure you have uncovered every hidden flaw, you are aware of every possible problem, and you are realistically projecting the opportunities. The goal of due diligence is to find out 100% of everything there is to know about the property and generate an operating plan and a budget from that information. In one property, while doing a thorough unit-by-unit walkthrough, I found everything from vacant units that were supposed to be occupied, falsified rent rolls, units that cannot be leased because the fixtures have been removed to repair other leased apartments, cannibalized units, a loose 10-foot-long boa constrictor left behind by a resident, a naked man in what should have been a vacant unit, roof damage so bad I could see daylight, you name it. You'll be surprised as to what you find, or in some cases, you won't be surprised at all. But either way, you'll rest much easier after the whole process is over and you know the property you are purchasing has been fully revealed to you. You'll be loving the language in your purchase and sale agreement that says all units must be rent ready at close of escrow. Right now, you're probably thinking there are 1,000 things to look at related to a property. This would take a year to accomplish. You're right. There are a lot of things to look at and evaluate, but you're wrong about the timetable. The bad news is you don't have a year to accomplish the due diligence. Rather, you have typically about 30 days. That's impossible. I thought that too. But then I remembered I have a team, and they can make the due diligence process much, much easier and way more manageable and actually make it a good time. To me, due diligence is really kind of fun. I guess it's the element of a surprise and finding the unexpected, both for the good and the bad. I also take comfort in knowing that anything I find that would cost me money to fix is in the final negotiation point before the sale closes. That's right. If you find that the property requires any type of major repair, such as a new roof, exterior painting, new appliances, termite extermination, snake and naked man removal, you can get estimates and factor those costs into the final valuation and the purchase price. The due diligence checklist. The file audit. The purpose of the file audit is to verify the actual potential income calculation. Please take a look at the list on the screen. The interior inspection. So this is to help you learn about the physical property, to get a sense of the quality of the residence, and to help you understand the exposure to your future cash flow should you purchase the property. You'll determine the actual condition of the personal property and get a feel for the extent of the major repairs. So these are the things that you need to look for. Government agency reviews. So the purpose of these is to determine that the property is in compliance with the government standards. So these are the things that you need to look for. Service agreement reviews. The purpose of the service agreement reviews is to determine the service commitments of the current owner and to look for ways to improve them should they survive the transfer of ownership. These are the types of service agreements you need to look for. Exterior inspections. So these are to evaluate all the exterior components of the property and determine when they may need repair and or replacement. So the things that you really need to look into are as follows. Take a look at the screen. The purpose of this entire inspection process is to put an estimated cost to each item on the list, not simply for the cost's sake, but to arrive at a total number that we can take back to the seller and discuss. What if the property is not in compliance with the fire department? What if there are environmental hazards? What if 3 out of 8 units obviously need new carpeting? In many cases, if you bring these issues to the seller's attention, they can be fixed before you close. That saves you a lot of money, and in some cases, an incredible lot of money. Books and records. As important as it is to know everything about the physical property, you absolutely need to dig in as deep as possible into the operations. That means looking at the books and the records. This is also the time to begin to gather your information for your operating budget by categorizing the income and the expenses. These are the things that I review in great detail. 24 months of income and expense statements. I usually like to compare the income and expenses to the projections. This is the time to make notes for the operational budget and flush out all the unusual expenses or major periods of rent loss. Discuss these with your seller or your broker before the due diligence period ends. You absolutely want to meet your deadlines. All the service agreements. I look for those agreements with termination clauses longer than 30 days. I verify that these costs are in the operating budget, whether the service is needed, and also what services might be missing. I assess the current management company and determine whether they stay or they go. I review all the advertising agreements for their effectiveness. It's worth your time to review all these agreements because you could find yourself locked into them. The current rent roll. This is when I verify the actual income, the actual potential income, and the future potential income to the penny. Take a hard look at every unit that is under the market rent. This is your golden egg, your advance to boardwalk card that will create an increase in your cash flow after you purchase the property. Take detailed notes for your management plan and your operating budget. Utility bills. Here I verify all the utilities, call the utility companies, and get the last 12 months operating history on every account. I ask about the increases for the next year, and finally, I insert those revised figures into my operating budget. Payroll information. On larger properties, I look at who is working at the property and how much they are paid, especially if I want them to stay and work for me or at the management company. When assuming these employees, treat them like new hires. Be sure to find out the accrued vacation information. We also run a criminal and credit background check on all new hires, as well as we have them complete a drug screening before we acquire them. For me, the due diligence process is an exciting time. Sure, I get some great stories out of what I see, but more importantly, I know that whatever I find will be documented for the next round of negotiations with the seller. The due diligence document is my report card to evaluate how well I estimated the numbers during the 5-step property evaluation. In many cases, the problems I find during due diligence either result in a reduction in the price of the property, or better yet, they are fixed before we go to close of escrow. It's this kind of information that is only going to help you be more successful in whatever property you purchase, this one or another. We recently found a new landscape company this way. I received a monthly landscape contract on a property we were considering. The landscaping looked great, and I was surprised to see that the cost was much lower than what I was paying at some of my other properties. In fact, it was lower than what I budgeted for this project. This one find is saving me thousands now because this landscaping company does the bulk of our work on this property and our others. Regardless of whether I find jewels like a great landscape companies I didn't know about before, or buried warts that I missed would have negatively impacted cash flow, I am happy. Happy because additional revenue opportunities are always great, and happy because any of the problems are now in the open and they give me additional bargaining leverage. Only the stuff that isn't found during due diligence is scary to me. Once the sale is closed, you're stuck with any and all hidden problems, and they can cost a lot. Imagine not checking the property's drainage only to find out that after a big rainstorm, raw sewage drained into one or more of your apartments. Don't laugh. It happened to a friend of mine on Maui, and the cost to clean up all the damage and correct the drainage problem were huge. That was a crappy deal. That's why, as you can imagine, I am very diligent during due diligence, and you should be too. And don't forget the downloads that'll help you with the concepts that are covered in this video. Now that you have all the information, how do you make sense of it all? And how do you know what to look for? You may feel you've just become part of a research business instead of a property investment business. And at some point, you're going to want to get out of the analysis mode and say, show me the money. This video will show you how to make sense of all the data and how to put it into a form that will enable you to see exactly where the money-making opportunities are and where they aren't. Because remember, at this point, you are still in due diligence mode. So if you find that the money-making opportunities aren't there, there is still time to renegotiate the property price or pull out of the deal entirely if the numbers simply won't add up to the profit in your pocket. In the following video, I'll walk you through how to formulate a management plan and an operating budget simultaneously for the property. They really go hand in hand. The management plan will define the key strategies you will use to either cut expenses, increase income, or both. The operating budget links numbers to those strategies and helps you quantify your bang for the buck. At this point, I ask myself, how will I run the property once it's mine? I'd rather take the time before I've closed on a sale to develop a few what-if scenarios than to live through some of the if-only scenarios. If only I had taken the time to develop an operating budget. If only I had bothered to hire a property manager to help me assess the cost of maintenance. The goal of this video is to make sure you never say, if only. The property plan. It would be nice if making sense of your property evaluation was as easy as finding that $700,000 worth of repairs that are needed, saying, Mr. Seller, we want to reduce our asking price by $700,000. Take it or leave it. It's not that simple. With many properties, we might look at that $700,000 repair bill as part of a bigger picture. And that bigger picture is called the property plan. You will reach your financial goals much quicker if you can find property that is underperforming and kick it into shape through sound management. As you probably know by now, sound management means reducing expenses and raising income. That's how you increase the value of your investment. Hopefully, during your evaluation and your due diligence, you found some specific ways to increase the cash flow of the property. The property itself should be showing you the money. If you aren't seeing increased income potential around almost every corner, then you're not looking very well, or there may not be much. If it's the latter, you may want to consider another alternative property. Your team members should be active participants in your mission of finding income-generating or expense-saving opportunities. They will see things you don't see. If you think there's no creativity in this business, you are dead wrong. I have more fun just walking properties with my team and just exploring the opportunities. Remember, that's how money is made. When you and your team see things that other people don't see and then capitalize on them. At this point, your job is to ask, what if? And with every what if, enter the numbers into the budget and see how the bottom line shapes up. Here are a few what ifs you should be asking of the properties that you are considering. What if I increase the rents? What if I renovate the units and I can increase the rents? Will it increase my vacancy? Can I test it on vacant units before issuing increases to my existing residents? What is my market rent in the area, and are my rents in line with that market? What if I need to attract new residents? Do I have a system in place? Do I have a waiting list if I am full? Am I keeping in touch with the vacancy rates and the concessions in the area by communicating with my team and surveying competitors regularly? Is that advertising that I'm using worth the expense? And is it making my telephone ring? Is it getting me leads? Am I getting emails? What does the advertising cost per rental? What if I plan to adhere to the lease agreement? Will it generate more income through late fees, non-sufficient fund fees, and parking fees, and water and sewer fees? What if I charge location premiums, installed access gates, or put in a child's play area? Would the residents pay for it? What are the other things I can provide that the residents will pay for? Will the investment pay for itself within 24 months? What if I replace an item instead of repair it? How much more rent will I get? What if I bid out my landscaping and maintenance and repairs? Would I save any money? What if I had a couple of insurance companies bid my insurance? Would I save any money? What if I installed energy efficient lighting? How much would it cost? How much money would I save in energy bills? Would the return on investment be worth the outlay of cash? What if I hire my own maintenance person to handle all outside routine maintenance? How many repairs can my maintenance person handle? How often am I paying for an outside service to do routine maintenance? What can I personally do to save money? Property management, landscape, accounting, painting the units, and move-outs. As you can see, there are lots of ways to increase income and reduce expenses. It just takes looking at the property and seeing the opportunities and understanding the residents' needs. The operating budget. In the earlier videos, I taught you how to read a seller's pro forma and to make an offer. The steps to the budget are not all that much different. You calculate the property income by using the income and the information you received on the actual income statement, the rent survey, the rent roll, the operating statements, and then you look at the expenses based on the actual and projected expenses you gleaned from the due diligence process. Let's look at the income first and revisit some of our concepts in a new light. The main source of income on most any property is usually the rent that existing residents are paying. That's the actual potential income of the property. For that reason, you'll want your rent figures to be as accurate as possible based on the information that you have. The easiest way to get this information is to get the existing rent roll or the schedule of what each resident is paying, put the units in numerical order, and add up the rent amounts. Another way is to physically review each lease at the property and write down the rent each occupant is paying and mark off all the vacant units. It's a good idea to do this anyway, just to make sure that all the residents listed have binding lease agreements. Once your analysis is completed, your spreadsheet should look something like this. Based on this rent roll, the actual income including the vacant unit is $3,492 per month. Use this number as your actual potential income in your budget. Other income opportunities. Most properties have other income opportunities. These should also be factored into your budget. The most common examples of other income budget items should include the following: laundry income, parking income, water and sewer income, late fees, non-sufficient funds fees, cable income, internet revenue, telephone income. From the operating statements and the individual ledger cards for each resident, you should get an idea of what other types of income exist at that property. After all, someone has to deposit this money into the bank account. Sometimes this information is difficult to get from the seller. Not everyone is a good bookkeeper. You will need to recreate the records from the facts you do know. For example, if there is a laundry room with coin-operated washers and dryers, and you do not see the laundry income on the seller's income and expense statements, you will need to go directly to the company that services the machines and collects the coins to find out exactly how much you should expect on a monthly basis. Kim Kiyosaki just recently told me that she was buying a property from a seller whose books showed that for over 4 years, the laundry company had not paid anything to the sellers. The washers and dryers were there. People were using them. You can bet this detail was fleshed out during the due diligence, and a realistic income number was entered into an operating budget before Kim bought the property. This is the process of uncovering and entering into a spreadsheet your income opportunities. Each opportunity should have its own line item. Once you have exhausted all of the existing income opportunities, enter lines for any new income opportunities that you may add once you take over the property. Just as you created a new line for each income opportunity for your property, you'll create a new line in your spreadsheet for each expense. I'll list and describe most of the most typical expenses you will encounter with your new property. Payroll. Payroll covers the salaries and wages you pay for yourself or your staff. A typical management staff, depending on the size of the property, can include several people. First, there are the on-site managers and the leasing agents. And then there's the housekeeping staff that assists with the unit turnover and the upkeep of common areas. There are also maintenance people who complete minor repairs of the buildings and the grounds. In addition to the actual wages for yourself and for your staff, if you have one, you'll want to factor in state and federal taxes, workers' compensation, health and dental insurance, as well as any other retirement plan provisions. Administrative. Administrative costs include fees you pay for special professional services, such as an attorney to help you establish partnerships and assist you with evictions. Accountants will help you manage accounts receivable and accounts payable, as well as guide you through the tax laws and tax reporting. If you plan to manage a property yourself, your accountant will come in handy. In addition to these professional services, all the things you do to run your property on a day-to-day basis are considered administrative services. These include everything from post-it notes and postage stamps to criminal and credit background checks. Marketing and advertising. You can ask the property owner to show you the advertising costs for the past year, and you may or may not get usable information. Better than that, ask the management company representative to give you an estimate of projected costs to advertise a property. He or she will know all the advertising vehicles in your market, the costs, and they'll have a good feel for just how competitive the market is. The more competitors there are in your market, the more you'll need to advertise to get noticed. That costs more money. Management costs. Management costs include the fees you pay a professional management company, or the salaries and the wages you pay yourself or your own staff. Repair and maintenance. Repair and maintenance expenses will vary depending on your unit turnover and how many move-outs and move-ins you experience on a given year. If you keep your property in top condition, you will spend less in the long run on things like carpet cleaning, interior painting, electrical repairs, plumbing, appliance repairs, heating and air conditioning repairs and service, landscaping, pool service and supplies, and pest control. Property taxes. There are two kinds of property taxes: real property taxes and personal property taxes, which are taxes on the contents of the property, like refrigerators, stoves, dishwashers, and other appliances. There are two ways to get these numbers. First, they are typically listed on the financials you receive from the owner, or you can get them from the tax assessor's office. One thing to know is that taxes usually go up after you purchase a property because the assessors use the new purchase price as the new assessed value. Yet another reason to make sure you don't overpay for the property. So when you are entering the property tax costs into your analysis, you may want to inflate them. Your property tax team can give you the insight on how much to raise your tax costs. Insurance. This is an important line item expense, and it's a critical one. Why? First, insurance is expensive. And second, because usually the bank requires you to have insurance locked and loaded before signing the loan. This number is easy to get. Just call up a few insurance agents and get some quotes. Deductibles are what will make your insurance costs vary. We vary our deductibles depending on the property. As a rule, you'll want to have insurance for the big things that can go wrong. Talk with your insurance agent about the proper coverage for your property and the risks of having high deductibles. Utilities. Identify all the utilities used in the building. This can include electric, gas, trash, sewer, water, cable, and phone. Check to see if the utilities are individually metered, which means each rental unit has its own meter, or if the utilities are master metered. If they are master metered, this is 1 meter for the entire building. Individually metered is a better scenario because the resident pays their own bills. Individually metered buildings mean lower expenses to you because every resident pays for their own utilities. In master meter buildings, there is no incentive for the tenants to keep their utility costs down. I typically stay clear of buildings that are master meter for this very reason. Ask the owner to provide you with the financials for the property, and these numbers should be there. But again, I always verify them. To verify the figures, all you need is the building address and the utility company's name, and they'll supply you with the bills for the previous year. Sometimes there are seasonal differences, especially for heating and air conditioning. Let's not have any surprises. Capital repairs. These are the major improvements needed to keep or bring the property up to standard. I'm talking repairs to roofs, parking areas, sidewalks, driveways, lighting, the purchases of carpeting, appliance, hot water heaters, air conditionings, and so on. This is all the stuff you would look at when you're buying a home, except you're evaluating now on a much bigger scale. When you finish entering all the expenses into your operating budget, total the income and total the expenses, subtract the expenses from the income, and you will get a good picture of the cash flow and your net operating income. If it's really big, go back and make sure your calculations are correct. And if it's negative, don't be discouraged. This is where creative accounting comes in. Once the budget is finished, you'll want to compare that to the actual operating income and expenses of the property and look for any glaring errors or omissions. If you have tried every which way to make the bottom line a positive number, or let's face it, a number that you're happy with, and the deal still isn't working, you may want to consult with your team. The last thing you'd want to do is move forward and pray for a miracle. That's not how miracles work. Lucky breaks come to those who do their homework and through preparedness recognize the opportunities. Regardless of whether you decide to hire an outside management company or do it yourself, you'll want to make sure you know either what kind of job you've just created for yourself or what you expect of the property management company you hire. So think of this video as either what to look for in a property management company or what to expect of yourself as your own property manager. The key to good property management and a good property manager has to do with systems. Systems to handle advertising and marketing, leasing, employee-related issues, hiring of outside vendors and bidding for services, reporting, emergencies, maintenance requests, rent collection, accounting, operating budgets, legal procedures, and anything else necessary for running rental property. Not only must a property manager have all these systems in place, he or she must follow them. The tasks of a property manager fall into several categories. Solving daily problems. The main function of a property manager is first and foremost to implement your property plan, and the second to solve problems. This is what I do every day with my property management company. My staff and I handle thousands of units combined, and even though our job title says property manager, we are really problem solvers. Because the reality of the business is that you are managing a lot less than you are problem solving, especially in the beginning when you just take over a property. Handling staffing issues. Property managers also handle all staffing issues. If you need a leasing agent on site, the property management company will have trained and qualified professionals to handle that job. If you are doing it yourself, either you or someone will hire and take on this task. That means you'll be responsible for training and equipping the person you'll hire with all the knowledge, skills, and materials he or she will need for success. This can include training in customer service, sales, fair housing policies, and so on. You'll also need a maintenance person or handyman. Again, this may be you or it may be someone you hire. If you contract a property management company, they will usually provide this service. If you are managing the property yourself, look for a person who has enough time and who will be available to you at any time that you call. An angry resident will move out and not only leave you with a vacant, non-income producing problem, that angry resident will cost you money to get the unit back into rent-ready condition. Leasing the property. It is the property manager's job to do the advertising required to keep the property at 100% occupancy, or at least as close to that as possible. That means knowing which advertising vehicles get results and developing the promotions and the promotional messages to get that job done. This could be ads, it could be signs, it could be the internet, it could be signing agreements with local apartment finders. There are an unlimited number of tactics for getting prospective resident traffic to any property. Professional property management companies know what works and what doesn't work. You can also handle this part of the job on your own. But be aware that getting residents is not the sole objective. You want to attract the right residents. So as a rule, I never rent an apartment to anyone who has not been run through a criminal and a credit background check. In every apartment building or community that we manage, every applicant is run through a background check. I don't feel any moral obligation to give those in need a fresh start, a home for our apartments. What I do feel is a moral responsibility to the people who live in my communities and make them feel as safe as possible for everyone that's there now. After the 9/11 tragedy, when the identities of the terrorists behind the attacks, as well as those who took part in the killings, were revealed, several news stations reported that they lived in a lot of apartment rentals and a lot of rentals. And in almost every instance, they used and lived rental housing. And many of them even had fraudulent Social Security numbers, and some even had criminal backgrounds. Missed opportunities leading to a global tragedy. I background check everyone and tell them right up front. If they don't like it, they can go somewhere else, because that's exactly the point. Increasing the cash flow. It's the property manager's job and responsibility to increase the cash flow of any property. Good property managers understand the real-world parameters which they must work to achieve these goals. But if you are managing the property yourself, you'll want to be aware of what the market is doing in your immediate area. Take the time to review your local news. Drive by your competition and call the surrounding properties in the areas so you'll know what the market is doing before you increase your rents. Simply call them and ask the rental rate, the square footage, the deposits required, and what is exactly included in the rent. Legal and contracts. Get into the rental property business and you'll quickly learn that most states have a lot of laws governing the operations of apartments, big or small. A professional management company knows these laws and has in place the appropriate forms for residents and property owners. In addition, they know how to file the appropriate reports and documents with the government. If you do not use an outside firm, you'll need to create your own leases, eviction notice, pet addendums, and so on, according to the laws. Management companies also ensure that all residents are treated the same. When you are your own property manager, especially of small properties, it's easy to be lax with the paperwork. This can and will get you in trouble eventually. And if you don't believe me, rent the movie Pacific Heights. Not everyone is as nice as they appear on the outside. You are going to want a limited liability entity or an LLC for your asset protection. For a good overview, I recommend reading Start Your Own Corporation by Garrett Sutton. Maintenance. It's the property manager's job to maintain the landscaping, paint the apartments and the buildings, make sure all the apartments within the rental units are in good working order, and to do everything including change the light bulbs in the common areas. This is all routine stuff that makes an apartment building look like a great place to live. If it is done right, or dump it if it's neglected, you'll clean the carpets, manage the trash pickup, as well as coordinate or meet with all the contractors for all the repairs. Additionally, if you are your own property manager, you'll need to source and negotiate your own providers for these services, including plumbers, electricians, carpet cleaning companies, landscapers, painters, carpenters, and so on. Rent collection. Rent collection can be an easy thing or a very challenging thing depending on the precedent you set with your residents. In the buildings that my company manages, we go by the letter of the law and make no exceptions for residents who don't pay their rent on time. In this business, you have to be tough. You'll hear every story, and although I feel for some of the people telling them, I also feel for the people who pay their rent on time. A property management company will operate just as I do with no gray area when it comes to collecting rent. It is easy when you are managing this aspect on your own to cut people slack and to be lenient. Don't do it. Our policy is to never allow partial payments. We do not waive any late fees, and we do not accept checks from anyone who pays late more than one time. After that, we accept only money orders. Never ever waive late fees or not sufficient fund fees. In some cases, those are the only motivators you have for these residents to pay on time. Remove this, and you are asking for trouble. Realize that with every exception you make, you are setting precedents. If for any reason you ever need to evict a resident for non-payment of rent, your previous gestures of kindness may harm your case. Paying the bills. When you own rental property, you may think you are in the accounting business. There are lots of accounting duties associated with property management. Property managers are responsible not only for collecting and depositing rents into the bank account, they are also responsible for paying all the bills on time. Every expense line item in the operating budget will have bills attached to it. Property managers you hire will take care of all the monthly bills as well as all the other bills that occur less frequently. At the end of each month, your property manager or you should complete an analysis of the income and expenses and compare it to the budget. Do it monthly and you'll stay on top of your business. Managing the budget. There are many property management software packages that help you manage the operating budget, and most of them work this way. When you enter the bills into the system for payment, you code them to the correct account in your chart of accounts. Each account has a monthly allocation, and when the bill is entered, the software simply deducts the invoice from the budget, leaving you with a balance. In a way, it's as if each account in the overall budget has its own checkbook register. This way, you can manage each individual account instead of just the bottom line. Many software programs will help you analyze how far over or under the budget you are for each account. This is called a variance analysis, and I do them monthly. Variance analysis reports help you see just how to adjust your spending so your bottom line stays on budget. Evictions. Evictions are a necessary part of this business. But the good news is they don't have to be traumatic for you, the property owner. Evictions can happen for a number of reasons, including non-payment of rent. But my company has evicted people for all sorts of reasons, and it is well within our rights to do so. The only time I feel good about evicting someone is when the eviction involves a drug dealer. Before you do one on your own, be sure you know your rights and the residents' rights. If you are managing your property yourself, you may want to consult with your attorney before embarking on this process. Customer service. A big part of managing a property is being available to your residents. Residents need to know that they can call any time of the day with a problem or an emergency and that their requests will be attended to in a timely fashion. At our properties, we have a 24-hour policy on all non-emergency items and an immediate response on emergencies. What constitutes an emergency? For us, it's fire, flood, or blood. There are certainly exceptions to this, but we do not dispatch maintenance after hours for residents locked out of their apartments because they lost their key. And they do call. We have an on-call system 24/7 to set up for all of our communities that is very responsive. These are just some of the responsibilities that come with the title of property manager. It's a big job that is around the clock, 365 days a year. I realize the first inclination is to want to save money so you can maximize your cash flow. But if you don't want to manage properties, that's not the place to cut corners. If a property is not managed well, it will not only make it difficult for you to find residents, it will make it difficult for you to raise your rents to market value. Finally, hiring a professional property management company frees up your time to look for and evaluate your next property investment. As we discussed early in this video, the way to wealth is property ownership, not property management. So let me tell you a quick story. We were already managing property for one set of owners, and they came to us with another property. And this was a 100-unit property, and it was in a very rough part of town. I went out to the property, and I was shocked at my initial walkthrough. There is no doubt that that property was going to be faced with challenges given its location. But it seemed as if the manager had given up on the building. I could immediately tell that managing this building was going to be a challenge. The first problem the owners had was that they signed a property management agreement that was fee-based rather than based on the percentage of the income collected. Even though I enjoyed a good challenge, I still had huge reservations about taking the task on of managing this property. For over 2 months, the owners and I went back and forth on negotiating terms that would be fair to me to accept the job. There was such a large amount of outstanding unpaid bills that I made it a condition that the owner bring all the accounts up to date before we even stepped foot on the property, which they did. When we finally did take over that property, we were shocked at the condition and the state it was operating. Nearly every unit on the property required a large amount of renovation work, including the occupied units. Not only that, the deferred maintenance was so significant in about 40 units that the previous manager had not even been able to rent them. The property was only 60% occupied, and many of the vacant units required $2,000 to $10,000 each just to get rent ready. And at the end, 98 units needed work for a total of $106,000. Because the property was in such a state of disrepair, rents were significantly below market. Once we began to dig into the financials, we found some pretty astonishing things. Shockingly, the rent income was about $145,000 below market. Based on a 6% capitalization rate, that alone devalued the property by almost $2.4 million. Operating expenses were far too high as well. The previous manager had not explored any ways to save money. A couple quick phone calls on our part saved about $20,000 annually in operating expenses. Unfortunately, that savings and some others had to go toward expenses to make even the property rentable. Even worse, we discovered that the mortgage had been intentionally paid short by about $20,000 by the previous management company, and that the lender was threatening foreclosure. The actual cash flow for the financial year ended up being a negative $166,000. That was an operating loss that equated 4% of the entire value of the building. Once a manager gives up on a property, as the previous manager had, the resident profile will eventually slip. Such was the case with this property. Desperate to fill up properties, the manager stopped doing background checks and rented to anyone who came through the door, a last-ditch effort to increase occupancy. Criminal activity got to be so bad at this property that even the police wouldn't want to go there. Instead, they actually approached us and they set up a substation at the property so that they can monitor the drug activity. So think about that. The police department had rented an apartment from us and they were conducting a sting operation on the residents themselves. We immediately had to evict 15 people when we took over this property because of their involvement in criminal activity. One of my employees went so far as to jokingly suggest that we apply for federal funding to become a halfway house for convicted felons. We faced a volume of work when we took over this property. In trying to get the property back to a functioning level, the workload was so intense that I had my corporate office employees keep track of the time they spent on it. The results were astonishing. The following is an actual monthly time and accounting just of the cost of my corporate staff for this one 100-unit property. So as you can see, property management isn't always very profitable. When I negotiated the property management agreement with the owners, I wanted there to be some safeguards because I knew there would be a lot of work involved. With that in mind, we settled on a management fee of 5% of the total income collected, or $2,500 per month, whichever would be greater. When we took over the property, it was generating about $31,000 in total income each month. At 5%, our monthly fee would have been about $1,500. Thankfully, we had a safeguard and collected $2,500. Unfortunately, I still lost money. Earlier in this video, I talked about the things that a property management agreement should pay for. One of them is the on-site staff. Your manager, maintenance, housekeeping, and leasing agents. It does not pay for the property management's corporate office staff. After our hard work, the owners were able to sell the property and even realize a little bit of profit. That would have been unthinkable 2 years earlier. To me, there is nothing more tragic than seeing a property's value destroyed by a manager's bad performance.